This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, I don't know about you, but I know a fair number of people who are planning a wedding right now. Some of them have whole years to figure it out, and some just want to get it done. But a few others, some very dear friends and family, they feel like they have to do it right now to try and lock in their legal protections before Donald Trump's inauguration next week. But planning a wedding can be stressful even when you've got loads of time. So how do you figure out the clothes, the guests, and the food and still make something meaningful on a really tight timeline? Today, we are with an expert to help you plan a very quick, but still very magical Pittsburgh wedding. It's Thursday, January 16th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. Fun fact, I was a COVID bride. My partner and I got married in 2020, which is not at all the same thing as exactly what we're talking about today. But I feel like I am very sensitive to what it takes to pivot on a dream scenario and get hitched in a hurry. And I am joined by CityCast executive producer Mallory Falk today, who had a very similar experience.
I did. Also got married in 2020 and had to majorly change plans. Again, not the same thing as fearing your rights will be taken away.
Not at all. But
we did a really small ceremony thinking we'd do something bigger later and never got around to the bigger one.
I know, at least not yet. You haven't, I haven't. We'll see what we do in future years. But we are very lucky today to have with us the creator and CEO of a company that caters to figuring all these little logistical things out for brides and grooms. Berg Brides, Victoria Deerdorf, welcome to CityCast Pittsburgh.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I am already so sad that I didn't know that Berg Brides existed a few years ago. You have so much on your website, like vendor guides, planning tips, even these like super specific lists of like venues and what to expect if you have a ceremony there. I'm in awe of all of that experience here in
Thank
Pittsburgh.
you.
I'm wondering if you've noticed any sort of trend lately of couples here maybe trying to get married quickly because they are worried about like our political climate.
Yeah, definitely, especially right after the election, there was sort of this surge, especially from the professional community here in Pittsburgh, vendors who were putting together packages or offerings for couples who were trying to get married before the end of the year or, before the inauguration. I think the fear of rights being taken away is very real. And many couples are considering, making it legal before they may not be able to do that anymore.
What is the fastest wedding timeline that you personally have heard of?
I had a friend get married in about a week's time. And this was, during the COVID era. And she is a wedding planner, so she's very familiar with the ins and outs of pulling something together very quickly. But yeah, I think it was about a week. And it was a micro wedding. It was beautiful. It was incredibly special, but it was fast.
Micro wedding. I like that already.
Yeah.
What is your single biggest piece of advice, I guess, for couples who are planning a wedding on like a really, really quick turnaround?
I think flexibility is going to be your best friend because you don't have time to really agonize over decisions. You have to just sort of say yes or no and then move on. And that means thinking outside the box too. Weddings don't have to take place on a Saturday. A weekday wedding is just as beautiful and just as special. And they're actually
extra special, I think, because you don't have to go to work. You've got all of your friends off work for the day too.
They're increasing in popularity for various reasons. But, think think creatively and be flexible. If you have your heart set on a particular venue or a particular date, you may run into some roadblocks trying to make those things happen with a short planning time frame.
Yeah.
Is there an ideal number of guests if you're throwing something together super fast? And I'm also curious how you invite people. Like, should you still send out snail mail? Is an Evite okay? Is it considered uncouth to just send people a text and let them know what's happening next week?
Yeah, I mean, I think with something like a wedding with a quick turnaround, the guest list tends to be smaller anyways. You're talking about an elopement or a micro wedding, which, I mean, there's no hard and fast rule, but I think generally speaking, it's usually under 40, 50 guests. And actually, digital invitations are actually becoming more popular. And this is also great if you're looking to have a wedding that's more eco-conscious. You're not wasting paper and you're saving money on postage. So there are other advantages to using digital stationery, but I definitely think that they are appropriate in a case like this.
What about like the amount of time you're supposed to give folks? Like I remember when I was looking at like wedding guides and stuff, they were like,
Yeah.
it is fashionable to give this much notice or whatever, but like that's less relevant in this case, I
Exactly.
think.
Yeah, I feel like all of the etiquette, quote unquote, rules sort of get thrown out the window when you're talking about a micro wedding or something with a short planning timeline. It's kind of anything goes at that point, and it's whatever works best for the couple. So if you have a lot of people who would be traveling from out of town, obviously you want to give them as much notice as possible to make those travel arrangements. If your guests are all local, you could probably get away with a few weeks notice. Especially if the engagement maybe happened a while ago and you want to just get a jump start on the planning and make the wedding happen quickly. So they already know you're engaged, so this event won't come as a surprise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm loving like conceptually the idea of like on a Tuesday texting your buds and be like, you know what? We're just going to do the thing.
Yeah, just meet us here and it's going to happen. And there is something so incredibly special about weddings like that.
Yeah, but I feel like you also need to tell people like what they're coming to, right? Like it's not a surprise thing. Otherwise, people will be like, I mean, I can't make dinner this week. But if you tell them you're getting married, they're going to make time for that.
Exactly. Yeah. If they know it's a wedding, I feel like that sort of gets it bumped up on the priority list a little bit.
Yeah.
Probably the most stressful part of wedding planning is figuring out the budget. Obviously, like different couples all have very different budgets in mind. But how do you advise people approach that, especially for something short and quick?
This is probably applicable to any couple that's getting married, but I think one of the first things you should do is decide what is most important to you. So something like photo and video, I think, is such a worthy investment because those are the pieces that you're going to have left over long after the day is done. And I mean, one of the advantages to having like a Tuesday wedding is vendors have much more availability. So if you have your heart set on working with someone, they're likely going to be available on a Tuesday afternoon. Whereas if you're trying to get married on a Saturday in June, that date has been booked for 18 months. So, I think that first couples need to decide what's most important to them. And that's where a majority of your budget should be allocated. So if you really want to provide a high-end luxury, handcrafted meal for your guests, you're going to spend more money on the catering. If you don't care about flowers, and it's totally okay if you don't, you're not going to spend as much money on your bouquet and centerpieces. So it varies per couple and what's most important to them. But personally, I think that photo and video, I think those are a worthy investment, even for an elopement or a small wedding. I mean, that's what's going to live on long after the day is over.
So you mentioned kind of a high-end meal, which, to me, much more important than flowers, but to each their own. I'm curious, like in Pittsburgh, we already do have this tradition of the cookie table where, you ask all your loved ones to bake and bring cookies to your wedding. I'm curious if it would be rude to just kind of take that to the next level and make your wedding a potluck. Everybody brings a dish when they attend.
In my personal opinion,
that was a heavy pause.
It might get a little spicy. We might have some people that disagree, but in my personal opinion, I think it's uncouth to ask your guests to provide anything like that. If you're doing this for budgetary reasons, there are other ways to cut your wedding budget without asking your guests to provide something for a potluck.
Yeah.
If you're doing it because you want to celebrate traditional family recipes, let's say, then that's kind of a different idea. And I might be able to get on board with that. Maybe that's something you could do for a rehearsal dinner then, or maybe you
Mm.
have an after wedding sort of like a farewell brunch or like a farewell lunch the next day. And maybe that's when everyone gets together and shares their family dishes. But for a wedding itself, where you are asking people to come as your guests, I feel like it's a little inappropriate to ask them to bring something. The cookie table, I feel like that's a little bit different because,
Culturally, we've all just accepted that it's like chill to
yes,
bring cookies to
yes,
someone else's affair.
yes, exactly. And I feel like there are lots of aunts and grandmas who get offended if you don't ask them to provide a cookie for the table. So that's like a whole entity in and of itself.
Well, so then I have two questions then. Number
Yeah.
one, if you are slicing a budget up, then like what
Mhm.
is your like easy to take off the table kind of thing? And number two, how do you recommend getting cheapish food that can feed a crowd?
Yeah. So, number one surefire way to cut your budget is to cut the guest list, which is actually perfectly tied to what we're talking about today. If you are looking to spend less on your wedding for whatever reason, cut the guest list. You can think of each name on your guest list is attached to a price tag. And that may sound a little strange, but if you think about each person on your guest list, that is a chair, plates, flatware, glassware, napkins. That is a meal, that's drinks, that's dessert, that's, additional tables that you have to rent, more centerpieces. It all adds up very, very, very quickly. So if you're looking to decrease your budget, the easiest way to do that is to invite fewer people, which is perfect if you are hoping to get married very quickly because those weddings tend to be smaller anyways.
Nothing ever made me triage my friendships and my relationships in life more
Yes,
than getting
yes,
married
yes,
because like
yeah,
you really have to like evaluate like wait, how
you
how
really
close are
do.
we?
You
I
really do. Yes, yeah.
I would actually be curious if you have tips for, if you are kind of culling your list, how do you explain to people who don't make the cut, who might have if you'd had a larger wedding, like why and how you're
Yeah,
deciding to have this more intimate wedding, why they didn't get an invite? Because you do run the risk of offending some
you
people.
do. You do. And I think, there were some silver linings that came out of COVID. And one of those, I think, is that people are more understanding of couples who are having a smaller wedding and maybe they don't make the guest list. I think explaining to folks, something like, we would have loved to have celebrate with everyone in our lives, but for various reasons, we are opting for something much smaller, much more intimate. And we hope that you will be there in spirit and you'll send us your well wishes. And we'll be sure to share pictures with you after the day's over. And hopefully, people are understanding of that. I mean, you could be having a small wedding for budgetary reasons, you could be having a small wedding because you're looking to get married very quickly. I mean, there are just a slew of reasons why someone might be choosing to, sort of keep things more intimate.
Do you think you proactively owe that kind of thing to folks or just like wait until someone asks you? Most people won't ask. They'll just be like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I didn't get invited," and they'll be sad on their own.
that's a good question. I think if you are super close with them, maybe a proactive explanation, but certainly not everyone. I mean, there used to be kind of this unspoken rule that if you were invited to someone else's wedding, you needed to then invite them to yours. And sort of similarly, if you were in someone else's wedding, you needed to ask them to be in yours. I personally don't believe that either of those things are true anymore. I think that anything goes for couples these days, and it's more important to have a wedding day that is authentic and that really reflects who you are as a couple and the people that are most important to you. And sometimes that is 300 people, sometimes that's 30 people, and that is up to you to decide.
Today Today's show is sponsored by the Frick Pittsburgh Museum and Gardens and a new award-winning tour of their historic home, Clayton. It's called Gilded, Not Golden, and it's a new spin on the old Frick family stories. Yes, you're going to learn about the mansion and Pittsburgh's Millionaires Row, but this tour is not about oohing and eyeing over the possessions of a man who famously, notoriously, played a very big role in the Homestead riots and the birth of the entire American labor movement. It gives you more, the complexities of the man, his wealth, and exactly where it came from. If you've taken a Clayton tour before, it is time to return. So tour facilitators can take you back to 1892, the year of the riots, the year someone tried to kill Henry Clay Frick, and the year he mourned the loss of two of his children. Plus more on his corporate legacy, wealth inequality, and Frick's lasting impact on our environment. History is complicated, and that's what the Frick wants to share with you. The Frick's new signature tour of Clayton, Gilded, Not Golden, is now open for the season. Get your tickets and learn more at thefrickpittsburgh.org.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Go to Blinds.com for 40% off site-wide. Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So then we got a little sidetracked with guest etiquette, but back to food, which is obviously critically important. Tips for providing food on a lower budget or, on a tight timeline where maybe your #1 caterer is already booked.
Yeah, if you're looking to do something smaller, there are so many great restaurants in Pittsburgh, and many of them have a private event space or will offer a full buyout. And that's so convenient because everything is right there. They can do all of your food. They can likely do all of the bar and the alcohol. They can probably do the dessert, or they'll work with you to bring in an outside dessert provider. There are so many great restaurants that are willing to work with couples, and they love hosting couples. Velazzi's is fantastic. They're located in Market Square. Their food is so good, and their events team is super, super helpful. Another one is Denoya's, of course, in the Strip District. Fantastic food. Again, really incredible events team. Another one is Revel and Roost. So they're sort of connected. Revel's downstairs and Roost is their private event space upstairs. Many of the hotels offer buyouts of their restaurants. So the Oaklander has Spirits and Tales, where you can do a buyout and, everyone has dinner at their hotel restaurant on the 10th floor. And then you can have that whole space to enjoy dancing and, dessert. The Fairmont, you can do a buyout of floor 2, their restaurant. So there are lots.
Is there a range one should expect or a starting price, I guess, for some of the buyout options?
Try to prevent yourself from having sticker shock because it probably is going to be more expensive than what you may be expecting, but you have to consider all that's included. So when you're doing a buyout, it's the venue rental fee, it's food, it's drinks, it's possibly desserts, it's flatware, glassware, china. All those things that
all the
would
busing, all the cleanup.
the staff, the servers, all those things that you would typically have to pay for or contract sort of a la carte. It's all included in one. So you may get a quote that has this really large number and, you might gasp a little bit, but you have to think of everything that's included that you would typically have to pay for separately, maybe somewhere else.
Yeah. It'll be a big lump sum, but you won't have to deal with the nickel and diming of all the other little things.
Yeah. Another option is, depending on the time of year, maybe consider something like a few different food trucks. I mean, Pittsburgh has so many great food trucks, and it's also a really unique spin on the wedding catering. You can have a few different ones pull up to your venue, and you can provide your guests with sort of a variety of options. And it's like a conversation starter. It's something that guests probably haven't seen before. So it gets them talking and it makes your wedding a little bit more memorable. So those are just a few ideas.
Well, so restaurants are on the table. Are there any other venues, like maybe smaller scale in Pittsburgh, that you just love working with, or like really easy? They're better maybe at accommodating a group kind of on that quick turnaround?
Since COVID, a lot of the venues that are geared more towards smaller weddings have been popping up. And at first, it was out of necessity. And then it sort of became like trendy to have this small wedding. 5 years ago, I would say that most of the Pittsburgh wedding venues were geared towards a guest list that was maybe 100 to 200 people. And now
Wow.
there are so many more that are really well suited for guest lists of 40 to 75, say. Tree Pittsburgh is one of my favorites. They're located in Lawrenceville and it's right along the river. So you have beautiful views of the water. They are dedicated to sort of the preservation of nature. So
Yeah,
it's
they help with our tree canopy here in the city. They do all kinds of tree plantings and stuff. I've actually been to a wedding there too. It's absolutely gorgeous.
yes, yes, they're great to work with. So if you are a couple that, is looking to have a green wedding, that's a great space
Green,
to do
literally
so.
green wedding.
Yeah, literally green. Yeah.
I've also heard great things about places like, the county courthouse, for
Hmm.
example. Like some city parks are great. That's actually what
Yeah.
my partner and I had always planned to do, but it worked out really well in COVID
Yeah.
circumstances. We did it like by planning well ahead of time. But is that a thing that you can do without as much planning? Like, can you just like pop into like a public space or a park or something like that? Is that kosher?
That's a good question. I think you can, as long as you don't close off any roads or sections of said park, like the overlook.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to have a ceremony at one of the overlooks, but you want to kind of close it off to the general public, you do need a permit for something like that you can get through the city. But if you are like, hey, my partner and I want to get married in the middle of Shenley Park and it's just the two of us and our officiant, I think something like that is totally doable and you don't need to worry about permits or anything like that.
I was telling Mallory as we got ready for this that I once like was sipping coffee like down on the strip and like looking up towards the Pennsylvania and watched an entire full wedding party
Yeah.
sprint away, getting chased out by somebody that
Yeah.
was like, "You have to pay to be here."
Some of the spaces in Pittsburgh do require a photography permit.
Yeah.
You kind of have to be on the lookout for places like that. But yeah, a lot of them are just, fair game.
Yeah. What about like wardrobe suggestions? Like if you're trying to find the right
Yes.
fit headed into the day.
Yes. The fit is so important. There are a few places in Pittsburgh that you can buy off the rack. Bridal Maven is one of them. It's located in Dormont, and it is actually a bridal consignment store. So people who have already gotten married can consign their wedding dresses at Bridal Maven, and then soon newlyweds can go and purchase a previously worn wedding dress. So this is fantastic for multiple reasons. One, you can purchase right off the rack, no waiting for your dress to come in. You can take it home with you that day. Two, it's so much better for the environment. These dresses, I mean, they're so beautiful. They're so well crafted and they get worn for a couple of hours
I
and
know.
then who knows what happens to them.
They sit in your closet in a bag for years.
This is a great way to give a second life to your wedding dress. And they're sold at a discounted rate. So if you're looking to save a little bit of money on your wedding attire, Bridal Maven is a great option. Another similar option is Luck Three Ducks Bridal in Lawrenceville. They sell sample wedding dresses off the rack. So the sample gowns that you would try on in a traditional bridal boutique, once sort of that fashion season is over, those dresses, what happens to them? So they will sell these sample gowns. So those are two great options if you're looking for something quick, if you're looking for something that's a little more budget friendly.
I'm already sad that I
Yeah.
didn't know about either of those options when it was my turn.
Yeah.
The shop I went to, they actually sold me their sample, and it was a great way to get a gown I would have never been able to afford
Yes.
otherwise.
Yes, I actually purchased a sample gown as well, and I didn't know it was the sample gown. It just happened to be the one that I fell in love with. And they were like, "Oh, this dress is actually discontinued, but we could sell you the sample." And I was like, "Yes, please." So I ended up saving a ton of money on it.
So, because part of the impetus for having this conversation now is couples who are trying to get married, before or soon after inauguration who are concerned about their rights. I'm curious if there are any folks, any vendors you really love working with who are especially thoughtful in their approach to queer weddings.
Yes, absolutely. There are so many wonderful Pittsburgh wedding vendors who are inclusive and who make it a point to let their audience know that they are inclusive. So if you are looking for an inclusive wedding vendor, I would definitely take a look at their social media, take a look at their website. Look for something that says that they are inclusive. Look at their online portfolio. Are they showing off a variety of couples? Are they showing off same-sex couples? Are they showing off mixed-race couples? Are they showing off plus-sized couples? I mean, inclusivity doesn't just mean LGBTQ plus. So there are a few that I absolutely love working with. I think Dawn Derbyshire Photography is really amazing at screaming from the rooftops that all couples are welcome and safe with her. Topaz Thimble is another one. She does alterations. She's located in Dormont. Cheerful Balloon Company, which isn't a traditional wedding vendor, but she's sort of in that world as well. And in the Berg Brides Vendor Guide, you can actually look for vendors who identify as LGBTQ plus. So if you want to support members of that community, even if you are a heterosexual couple, maybe you want some of your wedding dollars to support LGBTQ plus owned businesses. So you can sort our vendor guide to find members of those communities so you can sort of allocate your wedding dollars according to your values.
I think one of the things that struck us as we were kind of like doing a little bit of our research on this, and we're so grateful, Victoria, that we found you to kind of guide us through it, is it seems like among at least some of our friend groups, so super anecdotal, that maybe smaller weddings, like generally, are becoming a bit more popular. Like, I went to one the other day that was in the teeniest of tiny churches. It's where her grandparents got married, and then they had the reception in a fire hall. And it was one of the best affairs that I have been to in ages because it just felt so authentic.
Yeah.
And, all three of us, I think, like, it's fair to say, like, we've all, like, kind of come of age in this era of, like, the big blowout where you spend thousands of dollars. But maybe, like, that's just not going to be the move as much, kind of in this post-pandemic world.
Yeah, I think that small weddings were born out of a necessity, and then people realized how incredible they are and how special they are. And especially if you are the type of person who just cannot fathom spending 50, 60, $70,000 on a wedding, they are a great option for you. So they have definitely stayed popular, and I'm so happy for that.
So I'm curious if you just have sort of any final tips for the kinds of touches that you can add, if you're having a wedding on a timeline you didn't originally plan, maybe under kind of crappy circumstances because of external stuff that's happening. Like, what are the special touches that you can add to make it feel really meaningful and really celebratory, even if it wasn't the original vision for your wedding?
Yes, I think there are so many ways to make a small or a fast wedding special. Invest in photo and video. Like I said before, those are the only things that you're going to have that live on long after the day is over. So invest in a professional photographer and videographer who is going to capture your day in a way that's authentic to you. Think about your guest experience. How do you want them to feel on your wedding? What sort of thoughts do you want them to walk away with? Something like a handwritten note for each guest is very easily to accomplish if you have a small guest list and goes such a long way to making your guests feel special and for having that sort of be a lasting memory for them. Having really amazing food and wine, providing them with a fantastic meal. You know, Allow yourself to have the sort of traditional like experience of getting ready for your wedding. Like get glammed up, hire that makeup artist, get your hair done, whatever that means to you, make it something special. Just because you're having a wedding on a Tuesday at the courthouse with 10 people doesn't mean that you need to, cut out everything that would make you feel like it's your wedding day.
From personal experience, I said I never got around to having my big wedding part 2 because there were these special touches at the part 1. Like I walked down the aisle to my brother playing accordion over Zoom, and that kind of stuff just made it feel really special. And it's the kind of thing that would have never happened if I were getting married under any other circumstance.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Victoria Deardorff, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. Victoria is the creator and CEO of Berg Brides. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you're liking what we do, please consider a membership to CityCast. It gets you ad-free listening, and you'll know that you're helping support and inform our shared community for months and years to come. You can get all the details at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Talk to you soon.
Yeah. So, and Berg Brides just celebrated its 10th anniversary.
Well, I don't remember what the 10th anniversary is, but I hope there was like some kind of wedding occasion.
I think it's 10. Like, it's not very exciting. I think I looked it up and I was like, oh, because I was like, oh, maybe I'll buy myself like a fancy gift. And I was like,
you said you got a roll of aluminum foil? Like,
yeah. I was like, oh, not diamonds?